Welcome back to Problem Solved, where we speak with the leaders redefining healthcare. Today, I'm thrilled to have Mick Twomey, CEO and co-founder of Hyperlift, who has brought you Stars Monitor, a leading stars management solution to the market. Hyperlift has been a standout in Medicare stars management, innovation, helping plans deliver better measure and stars performance using a disciplined, data-driven approach. Mick, congrats on all the success and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shub. Very happy to be here. It's always been a good relationship with you and with the team, and looking forward to diving into some stuff today.
Oh, this is super. Thank you. Actually, let's start there. Let's start with your story. For listeners who may be newer to stars, what is Stars Monitor, and why does the industry need a solution like this?
So, Stars Monitor, I probably look at it as an analytics data visualization tool. Like the whole concept is, how do we make stars teams' lives easier? And, it could be CMS is making a change. And, if that change were to go through, what does that look like, for our contract? Understanding how it impacts your contract, very different than just understanding conceptually, right? But, why does the industry need it? It's I think about like, how do people use it? We do the heavy lifting. So we're doing, year-end projections for each of the measures. We're looking at, how does that play in with QI, reward factor, EO for all, helping you really understand how to best drive improvement. What's the path of least resistance, if you will, to optimizing your overall scores.
Fantastic. Really massive need. And as you've had this really interesting journey in the stars world, talk us through that journey. What surprised you the most as you scale the company in this backdrop of this changing industry with pressure across all sides?
Pressure across all sides. I mean, I think it's an apt description right now. You look at the pace of change here over the last few years, and probably the pace of change and the impact on high-performing plans. It really started with Tukey, and I think a lot of us were kind of under the opinion of that, based on how Tukey's structured, you're going to see all of this pressure on cut points pushing them up at like the 2 and 3 star level, right? Reality, how this played out was Tukey negatively impacted the high-performing plans to a much more significant degree than low performing. The lower performing plans actually improved. And you saw the same thing with the member experience weight change, much bigger impact on higher performing plans, which kind of makes sense when you think about, the measures that they're making less impactful. And then obviously with the removal of the reward factor, you're seeing, it's really negatively impacting 4-star plans in terms of QBP. 4.5 and 5 star in terms of overall score, but how you think about these changes and how you react to them or proactively make changes, I think makes all the difference, and that's really been probably the most surprising aspect of me, just that pace of change and how much it's shifting the world for high performing plans.
And it just seems relentless. There's more and more changes every year, and Hyperlift has also gone through a lot of change. Let's talk about the big milestone. So the Press Ganey acquisition earlier this year. How do the combined forces with your team, which is delivering and serving so many plans, and Press Ganey's combined forces help the industry?
When I think about, well, let me start with how I think that it kind of impacted us, and then I'll transition to the industry side. So, we weren't looking to be acquired. This kind of came upon us, and the more we were talking through it with the leadership, it started to really make sense. And a lot of it was kind of access driven. And when I say access, it's like we got access to a whole lot of information and insights and people that we didn't even know, PG had available. But, I would say Stars Monitor was probably least interesting, when you came to like the survey side of things, CAPS and HOS. You don't have that typically, you don't have that monthly flow of data and insights that help you kind of craft things. And that's probably the biggest gain that I've seen, being able to access the analytics, the data science teams, at PG and integrate that with what we're doing. Um, Being able to now understand how to better leverage MX data and frankly PX data. This is one thing that I learned a lot about was a lot of the measures that you're getting from a PX standpoint actually have a lot of correlation with your overall CAPS results, and understanding how that plays in has been really interesting to me. And so how do you integrate that in? So I think the benefit is now you still get, that full breadth of STARS analytics, but it's also supported by a much deeper level of MX and PX insights that we can add in and really impact kind of the depth of what we do.
Right. That's really helpful. And this is in light of all the changes you were talking about in stars. And we've seen an accelerating set of changes, tougher cut points you mentioned, weight changes for big categories like caps and Haas. Inflation effort. There's a lot more effort needed just to stay in place, but also there's a lot more money riding on it with QBP and some of the bonus payments at hand. We see stock markets move as a result. So, standing today, how would you describe the current stars environment and the challenges that plans face?
Well, I think that we're kind of in the midst of this fundamental shift of stars math, and how do you think about improvement opportunities? Again, especially if you're a high performing plan, the world's just changed for you. If you're used to expecting 20, 30, 40 points of reward factor each year, and that's just going away, most of those plans aren't going to see any kind of significant, if any, reward from EHO for all. And so it's a fundamental change. And if you take away reward factor um, from Stars 2026, I think it was like 30 contracts would have dropped out of QBP. And, that's a fundamental change, $600+ million impact. And so a lot of this is impacting them. But if you're not one of those plans, there are new opportunities, right? If you've got a decent SRF population, and now you can take advantage of a bonus that you may not have ever qualified for in the past with reward factor. So it's opening up opportunities in that area, but again, just really challenging kind of the traditionally high performing organizations.
The high performing plans are really under pressure
Yeah.
as we see that. Um, and the common criticism we hear, and this is actually across all plans, is that stars become extremely unpredictable. Is there any merit to that? Is there, given your vantage point across plans with data, how do you see um, the tools that plans could put in place that'll help them?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably want to dive in a little bit more with the people saying some of that and understand what specifically they're looking at. I see things kind of getting more predictable in a lot of ways. I think the tools available that allow you to dive into member intelligence kinds of things. Again, some of the stuff that you guys do. Any of the PXMX data that is probably more available than it's been in the past, you have opportunities. When I think about, cut points, Tukey, especially in combination with the guardrails, but that has really tightened up the movement. You're not seeing the vast fluctuation that you saw in the past. So I would say that's probably more predictable at this point. Um, Maybe the most unpredictable side that I see is probably EO for all, just because of kind of the black boxness of the whole thing, right? You don't have historical trend information to understand what plans did across the board from an SRF standpoint. And so being able to use any historical data to then predict out where you believe the thresholds are going to be, that's going to be more challenging. But, it's really only impacting about a third of the market. And, you look at the average reward factor bonus was 27-ish points, something like that. And EO for all is going to be like maybe 11. So just far more challenging to score well on this. And so, but that's probably the area that I would see maybe the least amount of predictability today.
Right, right. And I think plans are limited by what they know. So it's unpredictable if you don't understand the population. SRF population is a great example. And um, the and we've seen some plans sort of break out. They've invested in tools, invested in solutions that do so. What's uh, what distinguishes those organizations that choose to start investing in tools? Is it? I'd like to talk a little bit about the culture of these organizations as well, as you've seen it. So, what distinguishes plans that consistently make improvements in stars versus those that are more reactive in place?
Well, frankly, I think you kind of hit on it in that last part of the question. I think it's being not being reactive, being more proactive. I think it's keeping your eyes open. Um, Understanding and being realistic about what's coming and how do you deal with this and weight change. It's pretty simple to go out and calculate what the weight change would have done to your contract score, right? If you do that, and if you were scoring really high on caps and operations and not as high on HEDIS and pharmacy, um, you know that this is going to negatively impact you, when this rolls out. Um, are you thinking about that? Are you, incorporating that on how you set your strategy at the beginning and understanding that, we're going to take a hit here. We've got to find ways to, backfill these points. Same kind of thing with reward factor going away. Same kind of thing with EHO for all coming in. This is a new opportunity. How do are you looking at what this new opportunity could mean for you if you qualify for this? Are you being thoughtful about, which measures should I prioritize for improvement? It's probably not, at least from a score optimization standpoint, it's probably not your lowest performing measures in the SRF bucket. We talk about like bubble measures. I'm sure there's a better name out there than this, but we call them bubble measures, and it's the measures where you're really close to the different thresholds, either above or below, because it's going to cost you the same amount of points, at either whether you're going into the top third or dropping into the bottom third. But understanding which measures are mostly at risk to cost you, that's probably where to focus. And then again, understanding using member intelligence platforms or any of the like, how do you then move the needle on some of those right now? So I think it's the plans that really are walking into this with their eyes open and being honest with themselves about how some of these changes are going to impact them. And as a result, then what do we go do about that?
That's great. Have you seen strategic shifts in organizations that are taking a sort of a more longer term approach or a shorter term approach? How's the horizon changing? Because stars are here to stay, changes are here to stay. How do you see that playing out?
Well, the pace of change has been so interesting lately, and you've got, just the ones that have come in, right? You've got Tukey, you had weight change, you've got reward factor going away, EO for all coming in, but there are also some really scary ones that are out there and haven't been, actually put into place yet, like the QI hold harmless change. That comes into play. That's again going to be another real shot to 4-star plans and 4.5 also, but truly from a QBP standpoint, 4-star plans. And then, what did CMS talk about in January? That they may get rid of a lot of the operations measures. Typically, those measures are the highest performing measures in a plan's overall set. And so that goes away, you're going to see downward pressure again. And so I think it's plans again that understand truly their strengths and weaknesses and being realistic about how do we approach this. When you're doing target setting, understand where you truly have struggles, what kind of movement's realistic. If you're if you're saying, every target has to be a 4 or 5 stars, but realistically, you're not going to get there in a year. We've never seen that in nature. You're really shooting yourself in the foot because you've got a number of your overall goal, but you've already set measure targets that are really not realistic. So, you're starting off a little behind in the race. And, I think if you're a little bit more realistic about things, it allows you to adapt and change and succeed, in these kind of times of significant change, at least from a stars math standpoint.
Right. That's interesting about um, uh, setting expectations appropriately or goals. That goes with the setting expectations as well. Given the vast number of measures that you can play with, how do you see plans breaking down what to focus on? Because you can't do everything. Has there been a strategic shift in how plans have started prioritizing what to focus on, what their targets are? Are you seeing winners there and those that are not winners?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're seeing is plans being more open. And again, like the thing we were just talking about, let's be realistic about what's coming and how do we need to adjust. If you're negatively impacted by the weight change, were you more aggressive on pharmacy and HEDIS, last year to start kind of pumping that up? Um, Another one that we have seen a lot more plans jump in on are the two five-weighted quality improvement measures. We've been huge fans of those measures for a long time, but again, with this QI hold harmless change potentially coming in, more so than ever, I personally think you've got to be much more proactive than you did in the past. It's not a Q4 activity anymore. It's how are we trending? How are we tracking towards those QI significant improvement thresholds? Just because the impacts are so significant. If you can move something from a 3 to a 4 on one of those measures, you're bumping yourself up 6 points. And I can tell you there were 15 plans in STARS 2026 that would have earned QBP had they bumped up one QI rating, or one QI measure, one rating, and it would have unlocked like 250 million in QBP. So like the impact is powerful, and especially if you look at Part D, the three-way meta-adherence measures, very often the threshold to move from no change to significant improvement, it's like a half point. So, a lot of plans are focused really on getting to that next star rating. But if you tweaked your focus a little bit and really understood that 2 points is a lot to move a meta-adherence measure, in a year, half a point, that's more doable and more approachable. And if you can get a focus there, you can learn how to take better advantage of, again, your unique situation. It's going to be different for everybody. But if you understand, where the levers are, it will allow you to not go out there and try to boil the ocean. Let's get specific and understand which measures really optimize our situation. And then how do you work with internal groups, with external partners to really execute on that?
Right. And that's actually a really interesting point that we've seen the industry change as well. When you can focus on a specific measure and you understand the goal is not a 2 point measure, which in many cases is hard to attain, but if it's a half a measure or a half a point within a population, then
Right.
you can be a lot more take a lot more actionable steps. So understanding that population, there are tools out there. There's a lot of AI and data tools, and specifically about member intelligence that's coming up. All the talk about predictability and precision, and knowing which members to engage and how. How do you see those tools and solutions playing a role in specific measure level gain focused improvement in stars?
Well, I think what you're saying, you're kind of alluding to some of it here, but I think that the real win is this kind of integration between that member intelligence and the stars math, if you will. So, the kind of stuff that we traditionally do, the kind of stuff that you traditionally do, how does that all come together? And frankly, the stuff that like PG has traditionally done. But it's in either case, it's understanding the measures that are most important for you specifically, to improve on. And then how do you gain the insights based on the member intelligence to be able to understand where to act, how to act. And frankly, then from there, you can also begin to track, are these interventions that we're putting in place, are they actually working? Are we seeing the results play out? Because ideally, where I think that this ultimately, I think it's going, and where I think it ultimately goes, is much more consistent analysis at the member level of understanding, unearthing, where the issues are, and understanding how to address them, understanding are these initiatives working? And that, I think, that sense of continuous improvement, based on the member intelligence data, I think that's where you're going to see people start to differentiate.
Right. I think that's right on. It's this continuous improvement. Behavior change doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't happen in Q4. It's not a Q4 issue. It is a continuous effort, and step by step, keeping your targets attainable, achievable, and then building towards it is key. One of the challenges that plans raise, and we work with you guys have mentioned this before, is a lot of it lies in the leadership.
Yep.
A lot of healthcare transformation, all well intentioned, stalls in slides and steering committees. How have you found plans that win or are successful? How have they approached this execution piece?
I think so. Some people are going to call it, let's say, stars governance, right? What do you put in place to make sure that leadership and the stars teams, are aligned and incentivized, like they're on the same page effectively, like we're going after this and here's why. And but I think it's also that next level down, how integrated, how collaborative is the process with the measure owners themselves. I think that you need to be able to go from leadership all the way down to the measure owner and ensure that we're all going after the same thing and for the same reason with the same level of clarity. Um, where we've seen plans be really successful is not just, a couple of slides in a leadership team presentation that go out. It's got some more depth. You've got a broader group participating in this. You have measure level owners presenting, how are they doing? And it's less about a report card. What did we do? It's kind of, here's where we are and what are we going to do in the next 1 month, 3 months to go and achieve the improvement that we're looking for. And so I just think it's clarity, transparency, and true collaboration, and alignment, all the way up the chain.
Based on your experience, what culturally is it's such an amorphous concept. Culturally, what environments have you seen that has allowed Hyperlift and StarsMart to succeed in certain plans versus others?
I would say, there can people can approach, getting a new partner, platform, whatever, in different ways. Um, Early on, we experienced some that looked at it almost like we were stepping on their toes. Like, if we're bringing in Hyperlift, that means you're saying that I'm not doing a good job, right? And it's truly never about that. It's how do we come in and help support, the analytics teams, the stars teams, so that they can go do other things and more, value added things. You're not having to do this heavy lifting. So I guess the where we have seen the most success is people who are just open. They're open, they're honest, they go through the process because it's more than just like a technical solution. It's a whole process throughout the year where you're doing the target refinement sessions, and are you including the right people? Are they coming with the right mindset? Are they sharing information? So if you're open and participative, then I think it's a great opportunity to maybe continue to gain insights on how to improve. You get a whole nother perspective from another group looking at your numbers, so it's beneficial that way. Um, and then the opportunity to just be open, communicate clearly, even when we're seeing challenges. Let's get everybody on board. Let's understand, how do we work together to get us out of this potential hole? How do we come together and actually drive to the success that we're all looking for?
What have you seen? So getting the data in stars monitors helps you understand where you are. What have you learned in working with plans, and how do you get plans to execute and sustain that change? Because that's where a lot of that breaks down. Like, any tips for listeners for plans?
I think it's a lot of kind of what we were just talking about. It's the understanding, it's the clarity and transparency around why are we doing what we're doing, right? You look at most leaders are very interested in your performance at a QBP level, right? And so if you've got a vision on, this is what we need to execute to be able to unlock or retain, this QBP, you're going to find that alignment. But it has to be rooted in something like that. We have to be very specific about what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I would also say, again, it's the transparency all the way down. How do we ensure that the measure owners understand what we're going after and why we're asking them? How do they fit into, the bigger puzzle that ultimately gets us to this, overall star rating? So again, it's really about alignment and clear communication, kind of start to finish.
That's great. Alignment and clear communication, as you said, partnership with the vendors as well,
Yep.
being the transparency. That's great. Let's we're coming to the bottom of the hour, and let's finish big. I want to have a question. We have two questions for you, actually. What's in your mind the next major stars opportunity to unlock for plans?
All right, then I'm going to give you two, actually, not just one. So first one, I think it's really important to be proactive about changes that are coming. Like I mentioned, the operations measures potentially going away. Understanding what that does to your contract, because again, we look back to Tukey or weight change or any of these. You might see that on average a plan's going to drop by 4 or 5 points across the industry. Fantastic, but if you look at the 5-star plans, they actually dropped by 37 points, and the 2.5-star plans actually increased by 37 points. So it's really understanding where you fall. Like, how does this impact you specifically? Because looking at averages isn't going to be helpful. And the other thing, where in terms of opportunities that plans can unlock, I might sound like a broken record, but I'm just a big believer in the 2 5-weighted QI measures. The power that those can deliver, the improvement to your overall star ratings versus the level of effort that can be required. It's not, there's no silver bullet here, but understanding, ensuring that, measure owners understand, what are these thresholds? And if we hit these thresholds, what does that do to our overall score? If they truly understand that, and you can roll that again all the way up to leadership, like, this is why we're doing this. We're not necessarily going after the star rating, but we're going after this. So getting to that star rating will be a multi-year journey, but on the way, we're going to have really good scores on these 2 5-weighted measures, which are going to bump us up, 12, 15 points, as we go. So again, no silver bullet, but I think the closest thing to it is really understanding and integrating the insights and methodology of the QI measures kind of throughout the organization.
That's great. That's great, your guidance. If you could change one thing in the Medicare Advantage stars ecosystem, what would it be?
Transparency. Let's just take EVO for all as an example. This is reward factors going away. tremendous impact. Kind of say goodbye to the fifth star unless you're a iSNP with 1,000 members. That's kind of what we're seeing if you take out reward factor. And so EO for All is the new thing coming in, and it's enabling opportunities for plans that never had it, the potential for a reward like this before. But it's, what's it built on? It's kind of like the QI measures in terms of the math, but you've got these thirds, so you get thresholds between them. And like right now, we're seeing a lot of plans move towards, or a lot of even consulting organizations move towards forecasting cut points, which I think is a fantastic thing. I think it's a critical mistake to not do that if you're going with like last year's cut points. But that said, at least you have historical performance that you can build models off of. But with EO for All, you're not seeing any historical performance on this. So it's going to be a challenge to build some of these thresholds. And I think kind of the whole process so far with EO for All we could have had less black boxness around this. So I'm excited about the transparency, or I would be excited if we had a little bit more transparency ongoing, just to help everybody plan and kind of impact the predictability side of things.
Great, fantastic. This has been absolutely super, and Stars Monitor and the team really helps with measure transparency and helps your organizations really understand where to focus. But Mick, this has been super. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your journey, sharing your guidance, your vision with the industry and the market. And it's been real fun as always. So thank you for the time, and thank you for the discussion.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I truly appreciated it. And hope to get to come back another time.
Yes, absolutely. And for listeners, if you want to know more about Hyperlift, want to connect with Mick and his team and Press Gainey, there'll be links in the materials that we send out and in the notes. And we look forward to having you again. And thank you all. And Mick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.